in terms of the community.
Oh, it does, and my father's suffers from type 2 diabetes.
Really?
Yeah, and my uncle has as well. So it's front and centre, but also as Verity said, it's a lifestyle issue as well. So it's about getting some of those campaigns out to and targeting specific cohorts of our society, men as well, because in terms of amputations, men are disproportionately affected as well. So it's a battle that's hard fought with more to come, really.
And others would say you can talk about lifestyle, but when you're living in an environment where all you see in your 1 kilometre radius is food that is totally obesogenic.
Oh, absolutely. And you are targeted.
What choices do you have?
Yeah. And people, and that's exactly how companies work. They're like, we're going to target the most vulnerable people and put the most awful things in front of them because they want to buy it. And I think that's really just, what's also really interesting is how sugar has become one of these things where, like, if you are middle class, you now hate sugar. So you're actually going to have a great, if we tax sugar, middle class people are going to be like, this is great, because middle class people are moving away from sugar. Sugar is the new evil. So you're just going to create an even bigger, class divide, and it really we're not going to solve this until we solve underlying issues of poverty and inequality in New Zealand.
That's an interesting topic. Quite a bit of response to that on whether or not you think that a sugar tax will be part of the solution or not. It's 4 away from 5 this afternoon. Now, is technology and online slang running the risk of ruining languages altogether? A Guardian article has looked into the phenomenon of replacing words with just letters to form sentences. This is one for you, Verity. And the increased use of emoticons to communicate. Apparently the trend to stop using punctuation and start relying on hashtags to make a point all began with the users of the micro-blogging site Tumblr. So is there a danger that written language is under threat, or is this something hope will be confined to the virtual world? Hashtag Verity Johnson.
Hashtag moral hysteria. I love this idea that language is this one block of immoving concrete things that are under attack. Language has always evolved. Language is a constantly fluid, evolving concept. And just because some people don't use commas, it doesn't mean that people have somehow degraded the basis of English.
There are standards, though, isn't there? There is a proper English. There's a standard.
But there are contexts
that you don't subscribe to because you're too lazy.
No, that's not true at all. There's context for different things. If I am going to write a report to my boss, I am still going to use all of the proper words and the commas and the appropriate language. I'm not going to be like, lol, jokes. Am I? But if I'm writing an Instagram post, of course I'm going to be like, lol, jokes. Because that's how you do it. You just change context depending on where you're writing. And I don't think that it makes it worse. I just think it makes it different.
I remember the day when I used, the term lit. And my six
I'm so
kids,
woke.
And my 6 kids, were laughing, in the living room, and one of them had to actually open the landslide and go out because he was laughing so hard. And I said, "What's the deal? What? I'm describing this music as lit.
Cool.
I'm really cool."
They were teasing you. Oh, Dad.
Oh, that's great. But you can use it ironically now for maximizing your own laughter. Yeah, it's like woke. You can use that ironically because woke has gone out of fashion.
Let me put it to you both. Do you think language should change, or should we keep it as is?
It needs to
certain
change.
Standard.
Evolve. Just like human beings.
Embrace. Take on new things. Get exciting. Exactly. Get crafty. Get expressive.
We are human beings, not bots.
No. Peter Fiu and Verity Johnson, thank you so much for your wonderful, wonderful opinions this afternoon on the panel. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you tomorrow at 3:45. Checkpoint next.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, a mother's horror arriving at kindy to find her disabled son with serious head wounds after staff say the 4-year-old fell down the stairs in his wheelchair. Mum says nobody called her or took her boy to the doctor and she wants answers. Wild weather closes part of State Highway 25 as more details emerge about the drowning of a seasoned boatie off Cape Brett and the rescue mission to save his companions. 700 women come forward to talk about stalking and abuse from current and ex-partners. And the Speaker of Parliament hands down a punishment for National's defiance of his ad ban. And Defence Minister Ron Mark uses his special powers to overrule a court decision on Whenuapai Air Base. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Defence Minister has used his powers to overrule an Environment Court judgment that may have jeopardised the military's use of the Whenuapai Air Base in Auckland. A construction company which planned to build houses on land bordering the base had asked the court to clarify whether noise from aircraft engine testing falls under noise restriction regulations. The court said it did. Ron Mark has now signed off an exemption under the Resource Management Act on national security grounds. He says the court ruling would have compromised Air Force operations.
Sometimes they have to run the engines up at 3 o'clock in the morning to test them prior to takeoff. It's just nonsensical that we cease all operations. I just can't have that.
Ron Mark says the exemption is a last resort and the power should only be used when absolutely necessary. Thousands of visitors are still entering the country without an electronic travel authority, or ETA, which became mandatory this month. Immigration New Zealand says the new system is being rolled out slowly to minimise disruption for both travellers and carriers. It says that there's been about an 85% compliance rate to date, and it's not aware of anyone being stopped and missing their flights because they don't have the required authority. Tourism Industry Aotearoa's Chief Executive Chris Roberts says a phased rollout was the right decision, but he thinks Immigration New Zealand should have been more transparent.
I just think it would have been far easier to have been upfront from day one and say, look, we're taking it slowly. We encourage you to get one, but the requirement to have one's been delayed for a few weeks, and we'll let you know when it is a requirement.
The Chief Executive of Tourism Industry, Aotearoa, Chris Roberts. The Police Minister says he wants to hear both sides of the story before deciding if the police has a problem with bullying. 90 current or former police staff members have talked to RNZ, saying bullying is rife within the organisation. Stuart Nash says RNZ's reporting has only told one side of the story, and he's cautious to pass judgment without hearing from those accused of bullying.
There's an element of natural justice in this. If someone is bullied, then we also need to hear the side of the story from the person who allegedly bullied that person, for example.
Stuart Nash says he has reiterated to the Police Commissioner that he has no tolerance for bullying and says concerns will be dealt with appropriately. A 47-year-old man who was shot in Foxton yesterday has died in hospital. Police arrested a man today who has now been charged with murder. The shooting happened just off Main Street at midday yesterday and led to nearby schools and businesses being locked down. The arrested man will appear in Palmerston North District Court tomorrow. And a man has died in hospital after a fight broke out when two men attempted to break into a van in West Auckland early on Sunday. A fight erupted between the owner of the van and one of the offenders, who was taken to hospital in a critical condition. The police have confirmed he died in Auckland Hospital today. The Speaker has limited the number of questions the Opposition Leader Simon Bridges can ask in Parliament as punishment for the National Party not pulling down attack ads. Trevor Mallard last month banned the ads after Labour Party complaints about parliamentary footage being used without the permission of MPs and a misleading account of proceedings. National Party MPs then posted more of the ads en masse. Nationals leader Simon Bridges doubts the ads will be taken down, and he hopes the ban will be lifted quickly through changes to the standing orders.
It's really important that we get these videos out there so New Zealanders can see what's happening in our Parliament. As I say, I'll talk with some colleagues. I'm not inclined to stop that.
National Party leader Simon Bridges. Strong winds have brought down trees closing State Highway 1 between Taupo and Tūrangi. The Transport Agency says the winds have made it unsafe for contractors to clear the trees for the last few hours. And heavy rain on the Coromandel Peninsula has resulted in significant flooding in parts of the settlement of Hikuai. A powerful tornado also ripped through a South Waikato animal sanctuary today, bringing down fences, tossing chicken coops hundreds of metres away and sending alpacas running for the hills. The twister hit the Takiwātanga Sanctuary Trust, an animal therapy centre for people with autism that also takes in rescue animals. Steve Brown, who runs the trust, says some chickens have died and they have spent the afternoon rounding up spooked animals.
The chickens, I'm trying to get into barns and things. We've managed to shut up our pet pigs, and the alpacas have taken to the hills and they've managed to get into a bush area we've got, so they're pretty sheltered at the moment.
Steve Brown says the trust is a charity and will need help with repairs. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 5.
Tomorrow night's netball test between the Silver Ferns and Australia in Auckland is shaping up as veteran shooter Maria Folau's last international in New Zealand. Folau won't be playing in the Australian competition next season, with the final team list released today. She's a notable absentee from the Adelaide Thunderbirds squad, where she played this year. A return to New Zealand isn't on the cards either, as the squads for the ANZ Championship were confirmed months ago. Folau has committed to the Silver Ferns' current Constellation Cup tests and the Quad Series tournament in England in January, but has given no indication of her playing future beyond that. Folau, who's 32, made her Silver Ferns debut in 2005 and has played 147 tests. The appointment of a new Tall Blacks coach won't change Basketball New Zealand's relationship with NBA player Stephen Adams. Paul Henare has resigned as coach of the New Zealand men's team to take up a position overseas. Basketball New Zealand's chief executive Ian Potter says the new coach will continue to speak with Adams.
Paul has been a really strong leader in the Tall Blacks scene and good relationships with all the players. So whoever comes in is going to have to pick up that communication role in communicating with Steve and other prospective Tall Blacks.
Basketball New Zealand's Ian Potter. And Roger Federer has confirmed he intends to play in next year's Olympics in Tokyo as he chases an elusive gold medal in the men's tennis singles. That's the news.
Dangerous shortcuts.
Is it just appalling practice? Is it fraud? It's hard for us to comment on.
Dangerous roads.
If you make a mistake, the consequences are significant because of either steep hills, bluffs, drop-offs into paddocks, holes too close to the road.
Dangerous hostels.
The operating of these halls has been contracted out to a third-party provider who are minimising costs to maximise profit. And when you're dealing with students' welfare, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough.
Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, creating new corneas out of biomaterials, the Auckland researcher and her pioneering science. And after 10, calm your collywobbles. History Hustle's Joe Gillard joins us with a list of words worth resurrecting. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms in Northland tonight. Waikato to Taranaki, occasional rain, possibly heavy, clearing this evening, a few showers tomorrow. For Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne through to Wairarapa, including central high country. Rain heavy at times with possible thunderstorms in the east, easing over central and western regions tonight, but returning tomorrow morning. Rain clearing everywhere by tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, patchy rain, lighter tomorrow, low cloud in Wellington tomorrow until the afternoon. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland mainly fine, isolated showers about Fiordland. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago, rain or drizzle, but only scattered falls in Nelson, clearing tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and Southland, mainly fine with isolated showers. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 5:08.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The mother of a disabled boy who was badly injured at an Auckland kindy says her son is too scared to go back and she wants answers about exactly what happened to him. 4-year-old Masua Tusa, or Sua as his mum calls him, has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. While he was at Manurewa West Kindergarten last Wednesday, he suffered extensive facial injuries, including deep grazes with large patches of skin scraped from his nose, forehead and cheek. The police and Ministry of Education are both investigating. His mother, Millie Tusa, says she only heard of her son's injuries when she went to collect him as usual and was told by staff that he had tumbled down some stairs while strapped in his wheelchair. I went to meet Millie today with cameraman Nick Monroe and I started by asking her exactly what happened when she went to collect Masua.
So normally when I pick him up, he'll be waiting outside the window. So there's this window where you normally walk up the ramp. He'll be smiling and waiting for us. The day that I walked in, he was facing the wall opposite side with the teacher next to him. But it was quite unusual for me because he never sits there. He was playing with this little car. Before I walked in, I went to sign him out. And the teacher goes, "Oh, hi Millie, I've been trying to call you for four times now." And I was like, "Oh, what happened?" He goes, "Oh, just want to let you know that your son fell. He has a minor graze." And I was like, in my head I was thinking, oh, it must be a little scratch or a little bump. And the way she was saying it also sounded that way. So I walked inside. I was like, okay, oh, my son, come on, let's go. I went to go grab his bag, turned him around, and he had this, his whole face was red. He looked so lost, like.
And the injuries to his face, can you describe those to me?
They looked more like burns. Like, it looked more like he was dragged than he was, just, as they say, he fell down the stairs.
So skin was missing from the side of his face?
It was like skin burns, like, you know, raw burns on his face, from the top of his eyelid down. He had scratches over here. He had scratches on the top of his lip, and then he had scratches on his nose, but you could tell the swelling was coming on the top of his nose.
Let's pause for a minute here. If you're listening, let me describe the extent of Marsor's injuries, and a warning, it's not pleasant. In photos taken within 24 hours of his accident, the 4-year-old has severe facial injuries, where the top layer of skin is gone. They're on part of his nose and upper lip. A large chunk of his left cheek is scraped raw, and his left eye is swollen shut. The red, angry-looking grazes continue along his eyebrow and between his eyes. They're also on the left side of his forehead, right up to his hairline. They're weeping, and they almost look like friction burns.
What did you think when you saw him?
I thought they were a little crap. I thought it was lies. Because she told me she was standing in front of him when he fell. If she was standing in front of him, how would she let that happen? If she was supervising him, how did he fall?
This is a teacher?
This is an actual teacher.
So how did they explain the fall to you? What did they say happened?
She just said that she locked his wheels on top of the stairs. She put him on top of the stairs and she locked his wheels. She was standing in front of him on the bottom stairs. But she says she does not know if the child pushed him down the stairs or not. Which I don't understand she said that she was supervising him.
But the kindergarten teacher maintains that she was with your son the whole time.
She was with my son the whole time. She didn't say anyone else. She just said she was the one that was with him the whole time.
And how was he when you saw him that afternoon?
He was scared. He was traumatized. You could see the pain in his eyes. The only thing he was saying was, "Mommy, let's go. Mommy, go home." But the way the teacher was saying it was like, it was nothing. The way the teacher was explaining it to me, it was like she was saying that it was just a little scratch. Well, if she couldn't get hold of me, she could have taken him to the doctors. He fell down the wheelchair.
Did anyone take him to the doctor from Kindy?
No. They just said that they were monitoring him, that it wasn't severe.
So he hit his head or scraped his face on concrete?
Yeah.
And no one took him to the doctor?
No one did. They just said all she was saying was she was cuddling him and she was just monitoring him because he didn't want ice pack on his face. They didn't take him to A&E, they didn't take him anywhere.
So did you take him to the doctor then?
Me and my brother and sister took him straight to A&E in Takanini. From Takanini, we took him to Papakura to get x-ray. And we waited there till 7 for the doctors to come. Even the nurses don't believe the story that they've told.
As a mum, what do you think of the way the kindergarten dealt with this?
I think it's unprofessional. There's only one child with disability in their kindy. When my son first got there, they did say they were able to look after him because of the hours that they gave us. They promised me that they were going to look after him properly.
You say they told you they tried to contact you. So did they mean on your mobile phone?
Yes.
Was there any evidence on your phone that you'd missed a call from the kindergarten?
No.
So no missed calls from the kindergarten?
They say they try to call me. They have all the numbers of our therapists. They have all the emergency numbers of my mom's number. If they couldn't get hold of me, and if they were really trying to get hold of me, they would have done everything they could
Can you explain a little bit to us about Masua? Can he get around on his own?
Yes, he can. In a wheelchair, yes, he can. He can talk a little. He can use his words a little. Mainly he does hand movements, hand gestures, rather than talking. He understands really well. We speak to him 2 languages, Samoan and English, and he understands both languages really well. He was a happy kid.
A smiley, happy kid?
Yeah.
So in his wheelchair, could he have rolled himself to the stairs?
Not if there's a lock on. And he knows where to go, where not to go.
Let's go back to what they've told you about what happened. So at the top of the stairs, how was the wheelchair set up, have they said, and what have they said about the brakes?
She said that she put the brakes on. She said that she doesn't know how he fell, but then when she took him off the wheelchair, she said that she was testing the brakes and said that the brakes were still good, in good condition.
After the fall?
After the fall.
And what about the tray that sometimes sits on his wheelchair? Was that on when he had the accident?
She said there were scratch marks on there.
So can you explain to us where the tray sits when Masua is in the wheelchair and what that would mean in terms of him trying to reach the brakes?
So when the tray actually goes over his legs, which covers the wheels and the locks, so he's not able to move the wheelchair or unlock the wheelchair also.
So he can't get his little hands underneath the tray and undo the brakes?
No, he can't.
And there are 2 brakes, one on each wheel?
Yes.
And if the tray was on?
He can't unlock the wheels.
So he couldn't move the chair on his own in that situation?
Mm.
Can you describe the stairs to me? What are they like there and how many are there? A roundabout?
Roundabout 4 stairs. 4 wooden stairs, yeah. And then it hits the concrete. From the concrete there's a little stand where the sand pit is in the corner.
How has Masua been since this happened?
He's starting to like to go places. When it happened, he mainly just wanted to stay with my parents, and my dad, my brother. He didn't really like going places because he was more embarrassed and more traumatized of his face than anything.
And how is he healing from those injuries?
From the injuries, he's healing really good. But emotionally, I don't think he's doing so well.
What has he said to you about what happened at kindy? If you talk to him, does he say anything about that?
I've asked him a couple of times and all he says is, "Mummy, naughty teacher. Mummy, naughty teacher." And that's the only words he'll always say. He wouldn't say anything else but teacher, teacher.
What have you decided about that kindergarten and him going there?
He's not going to go there ever again. I've literally pulled him out because it's heartbreaking. When you when you trust people to look after your child, especially a child with disability, a child that doesn't talk, it is heartbreaking. I don't know, it's very hard. Especially now when my son is too scared to go to school. He's traumatized. The only thing we can do is just move forward from it.
What do you want to happen in terms of the investigations and in terms of the Ministry of Education?
I want them to tell the truth. I want to know the full story. The story that they're telling me doesn't add up. For the sake of my child, tell the truth. Tell what really happened.
And that is Millie Tusa there. And the police have told Checkpoint that they're still investigating the incident. The Ministry of Education declined to be interviewed, but says Manurewa West Kindergarten notified it last Thursday that a child had been injured on site, and it too is investigating. In a statement, the ministry says in part that we visited the centre on Friday. While there, we reviewed the site for immediate safety hazards, gathered information on the incident, and were satisfied that children are safe to attend the centre. We also checked that the kindergarten was doing what it could to support its families. Now, the ministry says it has not received a formal complaint from the family involved. Meanwhile, the Tusa family say they complained directly to the police. The kindergarten has also declined an interview with Checkpoint while it works with the Ministry of Education during its investigation. And we'll put that interview with Millie Tusa and Masua Tusa up online. You can see the injuries for yourself from the photos taken in the 24 hours after the incident. It is 20 minutes after 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you see or hear on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or do send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Wild weather has caused chaos in the upper North Island, cutting power to several thousand homes, uprooting trees and forcing the evacuation of Freedom campers. Flooding has closed State Highway 25 on the Coromandel Peninsula, cutting off access to Pawanui and Tairua from the south, and a twister has ripped through a King Country animal sanctuary. As Met Service advises people to prepare for more bad weather, new details have emerged about a rescue mission for a sunken yacht in which one man died in treacherous seas off the Northland coast. Amy Williams reports.
Tauranga is mourning an experienced sailor and community stalwart who lost his life when a yacht sank in strong winds and 10-metre waves off Cape Brett yesterday. Stuart Pedersen was part of the crew of 4 experienced sailors on their way back from the Pacific Islands. The 3 others, including his wife, were taken to Whangarei Hospital. The Commodore of the Tauranga Yacht and Powerboat Club, Andy Knowles, says Mr Pedersen was a successful yachty who had sailed around the world and was a chief fundraiser for the local club.
Everyone's devastated. One of our leading members and extremely hardworking and generous in the Bay of Plenty Sailing Academy Trust.
Mr Knowles says Mr Pedersen stood as an ACT Party candidate and was an active member of the local Rotary Club. He says it appears the yacht sank too quickly for the crew to activate an onboard locator beacon and their life raft blew away. Mr Knowles says a personal locator beacon tied onto one of the crew's life jackets was their only lifeline.
From what I've heard, it sounds as if we were very lucky we didn't have 4 dead people.
The Auckland Rescue Helicopter Trust's crew chief, Mark Cannell, says he doesn't know why the yacht sank, but being able to hone in on a personal locator beacon helped ensure they were rescued quickly. Mr Cannell says the Air Force helped to locate the crew and dropped a life raft to them.
They had the foresight of mind. If they weren't able to get the EPIRB from the yacht, to be able to remember to take a PLB is very good. And it may have been quite definitive in ensuring that the recovery happened as fast as it did.
Strong winds caused some ferry services in Auckland to be cancelled and replaced with bus services. And a twister ripped through a King Country animal sanctuary this morning, bringing down fences and tossing chicken coops hundreds of metres away. Steve Brown runs the Takiwatanga Sanctuary Trust, an animal therapy centre for people with autism that also takes in rescue animals.
The horses are pretty bad. They've tried to go through some fences, so we've got torn covers, and rounding them up's a bit of a mission. So we've managed to do that. The chickens, I'm trying to get into barns and things. We've managed to shut up our pet pigs, and the alpacas have taken to the hills.
Freedom camper Paul Winkle didn't get any sleep when the storm hit Coromandel last night. The retiree was among 40 campers forced to flee a popular spot in Thames due to rising floodwaters in the Koairanga River, where about 160 millimetres of rain fell overnight in parts of the catchment above the river.
The weather really came in, and the camper was rocking and rolling, and it didn't get any sleep. And then at about, exactly 4:45 this morning, there was a bash on the door with flashing lights, and one of the local council guys knocked up the door and said, "Look, I'm sorry to wake you up, but the river's in danger of bursting its bank."
When Waikato Regional Council staff moved the campers from the low-lying car park near the Thames airfield, water was up to their ankles. Paul Winkle says he had been staying in Hahei when he heard the weather forecast and headed inland to the Freedom campground.
I didn't expect it to be that severe, 50 knots of wind. That's some serious wind. But there was ample warning. It was enough for me to abandon staying in Ha'apai.
Mr Winkle's glad to be home south of Auckland, as NZTA have confirmed this afternoon that State Highway 25 is closed at Hikowai Settlement Road just south of Pauanui and Tairua due to the heavy rainfall and the incoming tide. Tonight, people are again being asked to batten down the hatches as severe weather warnings remain in place for large parts of the North Island. People are advised to check Met Service for weather updates and NZTA for any road closures. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
Does the Immigration Minister have a Shrewbeck 2.0 on his hands? The opposition says yes, but Ian Lees-Galloway says the latest case has nothing to do with the one that caused him major political headaches last year. Mr Lees-Galloway ended up reversing his decision to grant the Czech drug smuggler Karel Shrewbeck residence, and now he's granted residence to a man with multiple drink driving convictions. The National Party says that's unacceptable, but it twice gave the same man temporary work visas while in power. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Karel Shrewbeck is a name the Minister Ian Lees-Galloway would be happy to never hear again. But up it came today as National's Mark Mitchell went on the attack over the Minister's decision to grant residence to a man with 6 drink-driving convictions.
I think it's far too easy for people to arrive in this country and tell us these stories about the fact that they're at risk, and we've seen that very clearly with Shrewbeck. When the Minister didn't go back and get the right advice.
National's leader Simon Bridges says residence gives him access to a range of entitlements.
What does Ian Lees-Galloway do when he gets the case in front of him? When he has an absolute discretion to do whatever he likes, he says, here mate, have the keys of the kingdom. Stay here as long as you want. You want to go on a benefit, you feel free to. You want to vote at our elections, you feel free to. It's not good enough.
But the man in question has the status of a protected person under international law. That means he can't be deported from New Zealand. The Minister says he's satisfied the man would be at risk of torture if returned to his home country.
Sufficiently sure to believe that deporting them would have been a breach of the International Convention Against Torture. So was the National Party when they were in government.
Mr Lees-Galloway got into trouble in the Karel Shrewbeck case for agreeing he'd be unsafe back in his home country. That was before media reports revealed he had travelled back a number of times. But he says this case is different. He told Parliament the man had been in New Zealand for about 20 years and rolling over temporary visas just created more bureaucracy. But National's Mark Mitchell says there are important differences.
You have enormous privileges awarded to you with a New Zealand residency that you don't have with a working visa or a temporary working visa. Well, all that you get access to all government support. You get access to ACC, you get access to WINS.
But there are also questions for National. RNZ understands the man was granted protected person status in 2012 and has not had a conviction since then. Mr Lees-Galloway says National granted the man 2 temporary work visas while in power in 2013 and 2016. Former Immigration Minister Michael Woodhouse granted the first one and says he has no recollection of the 6-year-old case.
Which suggests to me it didn't have the elements of the conditions that were before the current minister, and that's not surprising. In the 6 years since I was asked to consider the case, there's very likely to have been other things that have occurred, so it's difficult for me to comment, but it certainly wasn't a remarkable case at that point.
Simon Bridges says regardless, the questions are for the minister to answer, not the National Party.
I wasn't leader of the National Party then. And here's the thing, that if Ian Lees-Galloway or the government are indirectly dripping out little bits and tidbits on this case, how about they come clean and Ian Lees-Galloway does some interviews on the record where he answers whether this man is on a benefit or whether this man has been to prison.
In 2017, a Zimbabwean man calling himself William Nduku left New Zealand after Mr Woodhouse declined to give him a work visa. A self-proclaimed former member of the Mugabe secret police and having publicly admitted to murder, rape and torture, he was given the status of a protected person. National's Mark Mitchell was asked if he was concerned the man in this recent case had a similar background.
Number Number one, we don't know his identity, we don't know where he's from, but we do know that we have a history of people coming to this country, lying to us about the circumstances in which they've come here for, and they get awarded residencies, and unfortunately it's happening under this government.
Under the law, there's a prohibition on anyone making comment about the details of the man's case or circumstances, including a question to the Minister about the possibility of him being a terrorist or a war criminal.
It potentially would be a breach of Section 151 of the Immigration Act. I cannot give you any details that could potentially identify the person.
Mr Lees-Galloway says the decision to give the man protected person status, meaning he cannot be deported, was taken by the Refugee Status Branch of Immigration New Zealand, not by him as Minister. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, 700 women reveal details of stalking and abuse from current and ex-partners, why the Booker judges split the literary prize between two authors, and what the All Blacks say is the hardest thing in the long breaks between World Cup games. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard this evening, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And it's time now for Susanna with the headlines.
The Defence Minister has used his powers to overrule an Environment Court judgment that may have jeopardised the military's use of the Whenuapai airbase in Auckland. A construction company which planned to build houses on land bordering the base had asked the court to clarify whether noise from aircraft engine testing falls under noise restriction regulations. The court said it did, but Ron Mark has now signed off an exemption under the Resource Management Act on national security grounds. A 47-year-old man has died in hospital after being shot in Foxton yesterday. Police arrested a man today who has now been charged with murder. The shooting happened just off Main Street and led to nearby schools and businesses being locked down. And a man has died in hospital after a fight broke out following an attempted van break-in in West Auckland early on Sunday. A fight erupted between the Te Atatu van owner and one of the two offenders who was taken to hospital in a critical condition. The police have confirmed he died in Auckland Hospital today. The police minister says he wants to hear from both sides of the story before deciding if the police has a problem with bullying. 90 current or former sworn and non-sworn police staff members have talked to RNZ saying bullying is rife within the organisation. Stuart Nash says RNZ's reporting has only told one side of the story and he won't pass judgment without hearing from those accused of bullying. Sky City casino workers have been picketing outside an Auckland hotel where the company's boss has been talking about fair pay. The workers want to be paid time and a half for night and weekend shifts, but earlier negotiations with the company have failed. They hope Sky City's chairman Rob Campbell, who's at a Wellbeing at Work conference, can make some change. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's go to business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. House prices. This piques a lot of people's ears. They're going, they're on the rise again, are they, according to the Real Estate Institute?
Which we shouldn't be surprised about, considering interest rates have dropped and mortgage rates are quite low. They've not been this low for, when have they been this low, Lisa? I'm just trying to think. They're very low at the moment, 3.5%?
Yeah.
You can get a reasonably good mortgage for a couple of years, so yeah, pretty good deal. Now, that compares with what we used to see for mortgages, which were over 5%. And so that's helped the market, as well as the capital gains tax being off the table. That's also cleared the way for investors and others to say, maybe a good time to buy a second home or what have you. And so, our house price index is the Real Estate Institute's house price index rose 3.6%. And so the overall median national price rose, 7.3%. And that's a seasonally adjusted number, so that smooths out any kind of variations there. 597,000. In Auckland, where
we've... say, any particular areas?
In Auckland, where we've had some sluggish, no growth really, prices rose 0.5%. So that's on the positive side. And the volume of sales were also up in Auckland. So that's significant. And in addition to that, we saw some big increases in some of the regions. However, There's always an upside-downside sort of story. Westpac and other economists are looking at these numbers and they're saying house price inflation is definitely there. Westpac, that's been predicting this for a while, suggests that house price inflation will rise to 7% next year. And they've put a question mark over whether or not the Reserve Bank would consider lowering interest rates if there really is more heat in this housing market than had been anticipated. So one more rate hike this year, that's next month. The Reserve Bank is likely to cut interest rates. I said hike. I meant the other. So one more cut next month, but then maybe not into the new year. So some are predicting rate cuts in February, again in May. Others are saying maybe not. So interesting.
For our regional listeners, where you said some areas.
Yes, those were the biggest price drops were West Coast, Northland and Nelson. Those with the biggest median price increases were Manawatu, Southland, Taranaki and Hawke's Bay.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got lots of people coming to New Zealand, have we? People who want to live here.
Yes, people who want to live here. Net migration, it rose 9% in August. To a net increase of 53,800 for the year. So to the year ended in August, right? That's a 9% increase over the year before. So we're still getting a net increase of people, 53,000 extra people.
Do we know if these are returning Kiwis?
Yes, we do. We do know that 35,000 citizens came home in the year to August, but 48,600 left.
Right.
So more going than coming.
Yeah, we're still hemorrhaging Kiwis.
Yes,
moving
but
offshore.
other people are coming, so that's okay, I guess. And the departures, we also have numbers from the visitors as well. So we had a net 4,400 increase in the number of visitors. Most of them are Australians. And overall, there was a total of 3.9 million visitors to New Zealand in the year to August.
Hey, speaking of Australians, do we know if where the returning Kiwis are coming from?
No, I don't know that. And I think also the statistics have changed the way that they gather them. So we can expect further changes now. I think next month will be the last time they provide commentary around monthly changes. And that after that, they'll start looking quarterly. So the next time we hear from the stats department, not that they will not collect, they will still collect the numbers
but they'll
monthly.
Release it.
But they'll be releasing commentary around it, I think in February. Okay. So it'll be a while. Yeah, and I think
Before
it's just, because they don't have the departure cards anymore, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all different.
And shall we do a quick whip around the markets?
Why not? Okay, so the index rose, that's the NZ Top 50 index of companies, rose slightly, just 19 points to 11,045. That's a positive number, but overall the markets are tentative because the trade talks between China and the United States, no one knows what the details of that are and whether or not that's going to make any difference. Brexit talks back on again. What's going to happen with that? It's a make or break situation. However, there's some hope there, and that's one of the reasons why the pound has strengthened. So we're at 49.9 British pence. It's been a long time since we've been below that 50 mark. Yeah, 93 Australian and 63 US cents.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Palcio with business there. Frightening stories from 700 women who've suffered stalking and abuse from their partners have prompted calls to review the Harassment Act. The survey details harrowing accounts of beatings as well as ex-partners hiding outside houses and tracking through social media pages. New Zealand Women's Refuge says more than 70% of the women surveyed say the stalking started even before separation. But often women feel more unsafe after separation as they fear what their ex-partner might do next. Here's Tracy Neal with the story.
Patty, as she wants to be called, says the beating started long before she split with her partner.
Well, when I first met this person, I obviously fell for him, and we were together for 6 years, and 90% of that was harassed, victimised, beaten. Basically, I stayed there because I thought I could help him because he was an alcoholic, a drug abuser, addicted to porn, and I thought that if I could prove to him that I was going to stay with him and he could trust me and blah, 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 then all would be well.
But it wasn't. Patty says the physical abuse began when they had an argument. She had to find ways to hide it from her friends, and it only stopped once she threatened to call the police. But then the verbal abuse began, and the tactics that Women's Refuge identify as a subversive type of control within a relationship, the stalking on social media.
And he, unbeknownst to me, was getting onto my Facebook and stalking me through that and reading all of my messages to my friends, my family. He was also stalking me on Skype and discovered stuff from way back that I'd even forgotten about and I'd actually deleted.
She says messages to a friend from long before were dragged back to the surface and used against her to intimidate her. So she changed her passwords, but he found those too. She tried several times to get out of the relationship, but feared what he might do not only to her, but to himself. The head of Women's Refuge, Ange Jury, says Patty's case is a classic display of violence that most women respondents say they experienced.
That's where somebody is monitoring your behaviour, checking your bank account to make sure, to see where you've been spending your money, ringing you 50 times a day to say, where are you, who are you with? That's the same behaviour, it's just happening while the relationship is still going on. Equally as frightening and equally as controlling.
The survey involved 700 women who've suffered what's known as intimate partner stalking. Dr. Jury says it's harmful because it's often a precursor to worse, and it's often really frightening.
We're looking at things here from having GPS trackers put in your car, spyware on your phone, hidden cameras, drive-bys at all hours of the day or night, turning up at someone's workplace or outside a workplace when you know that person is about to finish work.
And more often than not, it's hidden from the victim. Patty finally broke up with her partner and says she was unaware he was monitoring her house until he told her.
I was actually incredulous more than anything that he'd had, the foolish desire to keep track and then come to me and let me know. I thought it was bizarre.
A lawyer who handles family violence matters, Sue Gray, says it's part of a wider problem.
We've had such a change with social media. There are all these new ways of people communicating with each other, and I think we're still all learning the rules and what's okay and what's not.
Ms Gray says for clients embroiled in domestic violence, it's often a big step to ask for help.
Look, it's a really big problem for women, anyone who's been harassed and who's been the subject of violence, to make a stand. And it includes domestic violence, but from my experience also even workplace violence, that when people have been exposed and they've been bullied, they need all the help they can get, and they need to know that there's somewhere they can go, that they're going to get some support and not be further intimidated by complicated processes and being fobbed off.
Ange Jury says part of the problem is that complainants are not being taken seriously enough, and it's time people were better protected by the law. She would like to see the Harassment Act reviewed to include stalking, which shrinks people's lives.
You can't use social media so easily. You can't go out and do a lot of the normal things. Your life becomes smaller and circumscribed in efforts to keep yourself safe.
For Patty, it was not as simple as just walking out. Dr. Jury agrees.
Sometimes it can be better and feel safer to go back. At least when you're there, you know what this person is doing. You can keep an eye on them rather than looking around every corner to see where they happen to be.
Sue Gray says it's important that people know where they can get help and know they'll be listened to. For Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
Meanwhile, in Australia, Queensland's new police commissioner is under growing pressure to fire a senior constable who leaked the personal details of a domestic violence victim to her former partner. Neil Punchard pleaded guilty to accessing confidential police databases and was handed a 2-month prison sentence, which was suspended. He's been stood down from official duty since he was charged last year, but domestic violence advocates say he must be sacked. Here's the ABC's Stephanie Smale.
The woman, who can't be identified, says she was pregnant with her 3rd child when Senior Constable Neil Punchard used the police database to help her former partner, his childhood friend, find where she was living.
It was like my threat had tripled. There was now an invisible enemy who was aiding and enabling a violent offender. But I just felt so unsafe. I had to relocate on 2 different occasions. and it made just me feel absolutely in shock. I now understand how so many women are dying from domestic violence in this country.
Senior Constable Punchard was stood down from official police duty in December 2018 after being charged with 9 counts of computer hacking. But the woman has called on Queensland's new Police Commissioner, Katarina Carroll, to fire him.
I'd like to call on the new Police Commissioner, Katarina, to immediately sack Neil Punchard, this officer, immediately so that he's no longer a serving Queensland police officer.
Anti-violence advocates have described the 2-month suspended sentence as grossly inadequate. Jennifer Boddy is a senior social work lecturer at Griffith University.
For this particular woman and for other victims of violence, they often experience severe trauma, fear, anxiety and so on, and we need to be looking at how as a community we can address domestic and family violence so these sorts of things don't occur.
She argues keeping an officer who has betrayed the community's trust in the police force is the wrong decision.
We need to be confident as community members that we are safe and that police officers will protect our privacy, and they have a duty of care to all of us to keep us safe. While a police officer retains his job in circumstances where they've put a community member at risk and violated their privacy, that sends a very concerning message to the community.
Jennifer Boddy points out Queensland's Police Commissioner needs to send a strong message that domestic violence is unacceptable.
I think irrespective of whether the police commissioner is a man or a woman, actions need to be taken to address what's occurred. All police commissioners need to have the concern for community safety as a priority and need to be addressing domestic and family violence.
In a statement, the Queensland Police Service says it's considering the judgment. The police service says it acknowledges the court's decision and Punchard remains stood down from official duty.
The ABC's Stephanie Smale. Parliament's Speaker has devised a novel way of punishing Nationals leader for defying his order to take down an attack ad. Trevor Mallard has temporarily docked the number of questions Simon Bridges can ask in Parliament after National MPs breached Parliament's rules by posting the attack ad en masse. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
The threat had hung in the air for weeks, the boot finally dropping, but without much heft.
I ruled that videos using Parliament TV footage had to come down by 5 p.m. on Friday the 27th of September. The Leader of the Opposition has defied that ruling.
The Speaker, Trevor Mallard, dishing out a punishment for the Opposition's disobedience, describing it as a trivial offence, but still requiring a response. In this case, a cap on the number of questions Simon Bridges can ask each day in Parliament.
He will have a maximum of 5 supplementary questions each day this week.
And that number will drop for every week Nationals video remains online. An ad, remember, which pokes fun at Labour backbencher Deborah Russell using footage from Parliament TV.
I want to take it back to the very basics of what this bill is about.
Parliament's rules require an MP's permission to use official parliamentary footage of them in political advertising. The order has rarely been enforced, but a recent barrage of opposition attack ads prompted a complaint from Labour last month, a ruling by the Speaker, and then the opposition's outright defiance. The Speaker had a range of options available. He could have docked Simon Bridges' pay or booted him from the chamber. He could have referred Mr Bridges to Parliament's Privileges Committee, with its ability to fine or even imprison recalcitrant MPs. Mr Mallard instead opting for a far milder approach. The new rules kicking in from today.
I don't get many subs these days, and that one wasn't answered.
And with Nationals Deputy Paula Bennett left to pick up Mr Bridges' line of questioning.
Good on you. Good on you. What?
The new order doing little to chase in Simon Bridges, who remains unrepentant and is signalling the attack ads will remain online.
Watch this space. The reality, of course, is we get questions from a variety of MPs. They don't have to come from me. The Prime Minister may find, in fact, that she ends up with rather more questioning, not less.
A committee of MPs is now reviewing the rules and will decide whether to loosen them. Mr Bridges is hoping for a swift resolution, else he may face a scenario where he's left with no questions at all. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
It's about 12 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that. Is docking the number of questions that Simon Bridges can ask in Parliament going to achieve anything? You can get in touch on text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. To northern Syria now, where Syrian army units are occupying towns along the Turkish border in an attempt to prevent further Turkish advances into the country. The Turks came over the border 6 days ago, apparently to clear the border region of terrorists. They were primarily talking about the Kurdish forces that had been in the region for years and helped with the bloody fight against IS. Yesterday, the small American force in the area began pulling out, concerned they could get stuck in the middle of the battle between the Arab neighbours. They leave behind a power vacuum that is now being filled. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports from the Turkey-Syria border.
Rolling in to a hero's welcome. Troops of the Assad regime handed a victory without firing a shot, arriving today in the strategic town of Ain-Issa. The Kurds say they had to do a deal with the regime after Washington left them alone to face a Turkish invasion. The choice, they say, was compromise or genocide. Further along a key highway, the town of Tel Tamer, also back in Assad's hands. Loyalists resurfacing. I've kept this picture hidden for years, waiting for this day, he says. But for other Syrians, this about turn is a painful blow. We met Abu Saddam and his family on the Turkish side of the border. He planned to go home to Tel Tamer once Kurdish militia were gone. Not anymore.
I was shocked when they told me that the regime is now in control. We were happy when the Turkish army went in. We were hoping to go back and live happily in our village. No one can go back with the regime there.
His young relative Mohammed wants to study medicine in the UK. He can't see a future in his homeland.
I think this idea is impossible because I think the Syrian war is endless.
Does that make you feel sad?
I'm feeling sad for my country, for my people, for what I can do for them.
And this is the latest phase in the endless war. Turkey continuing to pound northern Syria. We work with the precision of a jeweller, President Erdogan claimed today. But the civilian death toll is growing. Well, just across the border here in the Syrian town of Talabayat, rebels backed by Turkey have just raised their flags. In less than a week here, President Erdogan has created a dangerous new reality. Northeastern Syria is now a battleground, and the balance of power is shifting. American troops are pulling out. Syrian troops are moving in. The Turkish leader is unrepentant. And what of Islamic State prisoners being held by the Kurds? Turkey claims it found an empty prison in Talabayad. It's accusing the Kurds of setting IS detainees free to create chaos. But Turkey has opened the door to a dangerous escalation here. And there are fears the situation could move rapidly out of control.
Orla Guerin with that report. Allowing KiwiSaver funds to go towards investment property would cause a fundamental philosophical shift in KiwiSaver's purpose, according to one provider. The proposal suggested by the Retirement Commissioner would change current rules to allow people to use KiwiSaver to buy a property without having to live in it. Some have commended its outside-the-box thinking, but others aren't convinced. Harry Locke's been having a look at the debate and filed this report.
In the 1980s, around 70% of Kiwis owned the home they lived in. Fast forward to today, and that's dropped to just 55%. That's prompting new policies to get more people into the housing market. And Leslie Harris, the director of the First Home Buyers Club, says original thinking is essential.
We need to be looking at things differently, different ways of skinning the cat and different ways of actually assisting people to access their money for things such as getting into the property market.
which is what the review of retirement income policies completed every 3 years has attempted to do, with one proposal in particular raising eyebrows. It suggested relaxing current rules by allowing first home buyers to use their KiwiSaver funds to purchase a property in a cheaper part of the country without being obliged to live in that property. Interim Retirement Commissioner Peter Courts says it would benefit those in Auckland, Wellington and Tauranga, where the price of houses is particularly unaffordable. Not everyone is on board with the idea just yet, though. Founder of KiwiSaver provider Simplicity, Sam Stubbs, says if it went ahead, it would cause a fundamental shift in KiwiSaver's purpose, which might leave some people worse off.
It's already doing a lot to make first homes more affordable, and a lot of people are utilising it. To expect KiwiSaver to then turn into what is effectively a property investment fund when you've got people who would be paying rent in the cities they're living in and gearing up on property, basically turning KiwiSaver into a vehicle which is encouraging people to take on what might be unnecessary debt.
The head of the Property Council, Leonie Freeman, disagrees. She says it could help people.
This isn't going to be the answer for everybody, but it just may enable some people to get on a ladder to help build some equity that they can either choose to live in at a later point, or they might sell it and then buy somewhere else.
In particular, Maori and Pacifica rates of home ownership are well below the general population, with 35% and 20% respectively owning their own homes. General Manager at the Maori Housing Trust Te Matapihi, Wayne Knox, says Maori are still struggling from the effects of colonisation when it comes to home ownership. He says ideas like this one could make a difference.
In principle, I think it's a sound proposal. There need to be creative and innovative responses to the housing crisis. Obviously, this one isn't a panacea, but alongside a range of other housing interventions, it could make a difference for some whānau.
So could this be the way to give more people a step onto the housing ladder? Associate Housing Minister Chris Farfoy is unconvinced.
Having the ability to use it to buy a first home has been useful for a lot of predominantly younger Kiwis, but opening it up to even more New Zealanders to use it for an investment property, I think, takes away fundamentally what KiwiSaver was set up for, and it was primarily a retirement savings scheme.
And without government backing, it seems the policy is unlikely to get off the ground. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
Let me know your thoughts on that one. Aren't some people already sliding that one past the goalie already, using KiwiSaver to buy a property that they then don't live in? Text us on 2101. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. In a year of ambitious epics and daring tales of feminism and sexual violence, one of the world's most prestigious literary prizes has just been awarded to not one, but two authors. The judges of the Booker Prize say they couldn't choose between Margaret Atwood's sequel to The Handmaid's Tale and Bernardine Evaristo's story of black women in Britain. Thomas Areti reports.
And blessed are those who suffer for the cause of righteousness.
With a TV series dominating recent award ceremonies, The Handmaid's Tale has returned to the spotlight more than 3 decades after it was written. Readers have revisited Margaret Atwood's dystopian tale they might have first read in the mid-1980s, while new audiences have tuned in to the US-made drama to see what all the fuss is about. And with all that came the huge anticipation of the Canadian author's follow-up book.
2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one most travelled by. It was littered with corpses, as such roads are, but as you will have noticed, my own corpse is not among them.
That's Margaret Atwood reading an excerpt from The Testaments, set 15 years after the events of The Handmaid's Tale. Many critics say it didn't disappoint, and now Margaret Atwood has been handed one of the most prestigious prizes in literature, the Booker.
I would have thought that I would have been too elderly, and I kind of don't need the attention.
It's not the first time. In fact, The Handmaid's Tale made the shortlist in 1986. Margaret Atwood won the Booker in the year 2000 for The Blind Assassin, and she's been shortlisted another 3 times. The chair of the judges, Peter Florence, has described The Testaments as a savage and beautiful novel that speaks to us today with conviction and power, and it was widely tipped to win. But Peter Florence said this year was tough. so tough that the judges couldn't award the prize to one person. Bernardine Evaristo's story of feminism and race in Britain, titled Girl, Woman, Other, also got the nod.
This is incredible. I suppose a lot of people say this, I never thought it would happen to me, and I will say that I am the first black woman to win this prize. And I hope I hope that honour doesn't last too long. I hope that other people come forwards now.
There's no doubt it was a challenging year for the judges, with other nominees including Salman Rushdie, who's also no stranger to the prize. Nigerian author Chigozie Obioma made the shortlist for the second time, while Turkish writer Elif Shafak got the nod for a novel written in her second language. The only US author on the list, Lucy Ellman, was nominated for her stream of consciousness epic, Ducks Newburyport.
The ABC's Thomas Ariti with that report. And time for a quick bit of feedback before the news on National leader Simon Bridges having his questions docked basically by the Speaker for refusing to take down the party's attack ads. This person says Speaker's punishment for Simon Bridges is mild. Why should National be above the parliamentary law? And someone else says Simon Bridges is behaving in, well, the same way as American politicians.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with DNA. The mother of a disabled boy who was badly injured at an Auckland kindergarten is demanding answers. 4-year-old Masua Tusa has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair and had been attending Manurewa West Kindergarten. His mother, Millie Tusa, says when she went to pick up Masua last Wednesday, he had extensive injuries on his face, including deep grazes where large patches of skin had been scraped off. Ms Tusa told Checkpoint she doesn't believe what she's been told about what happened.
She put him on top of the stairs and she locked his wheels. She was standing in front of him on the bottom stairs. But she says she does not know if the child pushed him down the stairs or not, which I don't understand. If she said that she was supervising him.
Millie Tusa says no one from Manurewa West Kindergarten took Masua to the doctor. The kindergarten has declined to comment. The police and the Ministry of Education are investigating. Exactly how a report that revealed civilians could have been killed during Operation Burnham was handled has been examined at a hearing today. The inquiry into the operation in Afghanistan in 2010 got underway again today. It stopped last month when it was revealed a report existed that said civilians might have died. This was contrary to the Defence Force's position. Former SAS commander, retired Colonel Jim Blackwell, said the report was sent to him in September 2011. He gave it to the Deputy Chief of Staff, Mike Thompson, and briefed then Defence Minister Wayne Mapp.
I said that the document, which was a standard NATO response, was neither to confirm or deny, was that there may have been. But there was no evidence that I had viewed or the discussions I'd had with my colleagues that led me to believe that there were civilian casualties.
Jim Blackwell says when questions were raised about the report in 2014 by a journalist, he did not help with the response nor brief the Defence Minister, Jonathan Coleman. Severe weather warnings remain in place for much of the upper North Island after gale force winds and heavy rain lashed the region today. Flooding has closed State Highway 25 on the Coromandel Peninsula, cutting off access to Poanui and Tairua from the south. Amy Williams reports.
As Met Service advises people to batten down the hatches for another stormy night, one woman is in a stable condition at Whangarei Hospital after being rescued from a stricken yacht off the Northland coast yesterday in bad weather. Her husband, an experienced sailor, Stuart Peterson, died. Wild weather caused chaos in the upper North Island where thousands were without power this morning, and a tornado ripped through a King Country animal sanctuary, sending chicken coops flying and alpaca running for the hills. Met Service is advising people to keep up to date with the latest weather warnings. Ko Amy Williams, aho.
Thousands of visitors are still entering the country without an Electronic Travel Authority, or ETA, which became mandatory this month. Immigration New Zealand says it's doing a phased rollout of the new system to minimise the disruption. It is not aware of anyone missing their flights because they don't have the ETA. The head of tourism industry Aotearoa, Chris Roberts, says a phased rollout was the right decision because the technology wasn't ready to go. But he says Immigration New Zealand should have been more transparent and encouraged visitors visitors to get an ETA rather than telling them it was a requirement. A doctor who treated a mentally ill Thames man who was shot and killed by police in 2015 says a red flag would have been raised about his care had he known the man had returned to drinking alcohol. The inquest for 33-year-old Vaughan Temoananui is being held in Hamilton. Andrew McRae reports.
The doctor, who has name suppression, says at his last consultation with Mr Temoananui a month before the shooting, he appeared in a good space but didn't admit to drinking alcohol. He said alcohol was an underlying problem affecting Mr Temoananui's mental state from when he was first diagnosed with psychosis and depression. Mr Temoananui had also reduced the dosage of medication he was taking. The doctor said, though, Mr Moananui appeared to be doing well, so it didn't cause him any real concern. Ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
Sky City casino workers have been picketing outside an Auckland hotel where the company's boss has been talking about fair pay. The workers want to be paid time and a half for night and weekend shifts, but earlier negotiations with the company have failed. They hope Sky City's chairman Rob Campbell, who's at a Wellbeing at Work conference, can make some change. A casino dealer who has worked at the company for 7 years says their income has been decreasing over the years as the cost of living gets higher.
By doing this, it would be a win-win situation because we will be happier workers, well rested, and also if not well rested, but at least compensated for what we give away. And also I think that would work for company as well.
The casino dealer says pay worries have affected her social life. It's coming up to 6:05. New Zealand cricket has welcomed the change in World Cup Super Over rules, which led to England's victory over the All Blacks over the Black Caps in the World Cup final in July. After the game finished level following a super over, England were awarded the trophy on the basis of having scored more boundaries. That rule will now change at World Cup elimination matches, with super overs continuing until one side has more runs. The Chief Executive of New Zealand Cricket, David White, says while they can't change what's happened, he's pleased a better process is now in place. Ireland centre Bundy Aki's Rugby World Cup is over after he was handed a 3-match ban following his red card against Samoa at the weekend. Ireland's attempts to have the red card overturned proved unsuccessful, meaning Aki will miss Saturday's quarter-final against the All Blacks. The England defender Tyrone Mings says he's proud of how his side handled the racist taunts in their Euro 2020 footballer qualifier against Bulgaria. England's 6-0 win in Sofia was marred by the taunting of England's black players, and the referee stopped the game twice in the first half, threatening to take the players from the field.
It was obviously disappointing, but I think the way that we handled it and the appropriate steps that were in place and the protocol that the team and us as players followed, I think was effective. So very proud of everybody of the way that we handled it and ultimately let the football do the talking.
England's defender Tyrone Mings. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Brian Crump is back. He's joined by Eric Crampton, taking a look at the national policy statement on sensitive soils, among other things. We have a window on the world of the Liberian rubber industry, and in a special program in association with the University of Otago, Kim Hill chairs a panel of experts exploring the cost of food in an obesogenic society. That's Nights with Brian Crump after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms in Northland tonight. Waikato to Taranaki, occasional rain, possibly heavy, clearing this evening, a few showers tomorrow. Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Gisborne to Wairarapa, including central high country. Rain, heavy at times with possible thunderstorms in the east, easing over central and western regions tonight, but returning tomorrow morning. Rain clearing everywhere by tomorrow afternoon. Whanganui to Wellington, patchy rain, light tomorrow, low cloud in Wellington tomorrow until the afternoon. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland mainly fine, isolated showers about Fiordland. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago, rain or drizzle, but only scattered falls in Nelson, clearing tomorrow morning or afternoon. For the remainder of Otago, also Southland, mainly fine, but isolated showers. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow. RNZ National, it's coming up to 6:08.
Well, we could have cut that weather forecast short and just said rain. Full stop. Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. With the stroke of a pen, Defence Minister Ron Mark has overruled an Environment Court decision on noise restrictions for plane engine testing at Auckland's Whenuapai Air Base. The developer Neil Group won a noise complaint case against the base in the Environment Court last month. But Ron Mark has now stepped in and used his special powers to exempt the airbase from the Resource Management Act on the grounds of national security. He says the court judgment is now meaningless and it's business as usual at Whenuapai.
People knew when they bought and moved into that area that there'd been an Air Force base there since the Second World War. People know that those aircraft are required to deploy at any time of the day or night. Very often going out to search for people in peril on the sea, yachties, fishermen, they deploy to HADAR operations. Prior to deployment, they are required, which is standard aviation practice, to run their engines up and test them. That's quite aside from the testing that we might have to do after we've completed a maintenance schedule. And it's just unsafe to fly an aircraft without testing the engines before one even attempts to take off. So we have to do these things. It's part of the, it's what we do. And it's just absolutely unacceptable to think that we would have an Environment Court ruling on the back of a property developer shutting down and not being able to operate after office hours when we're required to go out and search for someone who's in trouble.
So this exemption that you're able to sign off on, it's for the purposes of national security. Well, did this warrant such a sort of high-powered exemption? Because national security, do we meet that bar for that? Because the Prime Minister gets flown out of Whenuapai sometimes when she's going into to the Pacific nations, and you have search and rescues coming from that base. Is this really an issue of national security?
I think there's a bigger question that still worries me, Lisa, and that is the whole question around encroachment and the ongoing challenges to military bases that were once set up in isolated locations, free from any sort of interference on their operations. I mean, you go back to Wigram, it was way out in the country outside of Christchurch. It eventually got built around and then shut down. A lot of it from complaints about the noise from the Harvards flying, and they were training officers, pilot officers, to fly. Look at what we're facing now down in West Melton, where we have objections to people who've moved into the area on lifestyle blocks because of the noise from the rifle. That rifle range has been there 100 years. We've got similar challenges potentially around Linton and around Burnham. If you look at the amount of growth in the Rolleston area, and I've had numerous property developers make clear that they would like to actually to put more property development out on the fringes of Burnham. All of that eventually leads to impeding the ability of our Defence Force personnel.
So this was about stopping a precedent, was it, Minister? This was about getting in early and setting some ground rules as you see it.
I have to draw a line in the sand on this one. As far as I'm concerned, I cannot have impediments to the Air Force's operations out of Whenuapai, full stop. The Air Force base was there a long time ago. People have moved, and here's the funny thing, Lisa. It's interesting. I look at the online petition raised by the residents of Helensville, and particularly those around Whenuapai. It would appear that 17,000 people agree with me. They don't want the Air Force base removed or shut down. They're proud of the fact that our airwomen and our airmen deploy out of there. They're proud of the work they do. They understand the importance and significance of Whenuapai to the national security and to the Defence Force. So if 17,000 people who are resident in that area support the air bases continuing in the way it always has, well, what's the big deal? I guess the big deal is we've got a property developer who wants to make a stack of money based on an investment in land. We've got Auckland Council who redesignated the area despite objections, and now we're in the position we're in. I'm over it.
Before you go, Minister, I'm really curious. Did Air New Zealand ever make any submissions to you on the future of that particular site?
Nothing to me at all, Lisa. I was blindsided and gobsmacked. Look, can I say that since the departure of a certain person from the employment of Air New Zealand, I've had discussions with Air New Zealand. That conversation's off the table.
It's over then, Air New Zealand's bid for an airport, second airport there?
I think Air New Zealand now are fully aware of the strength of feeling of the local community around Whenuapai as well. The reaction from local residents was immediate and furious. And I think if they were to, I just don't physically see how we could accommodate the car parking or for the taxi stands, the bus stands, let alone the security provisions needed for flying out of there, let alone a passenger terminal, let alone all of those separate facilities I just don't see how that would fit. But on top of that,
so to be clear, Minister, sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to be absolutely clear on this. You never received any kind of written submission or plan, suggestions or otherwise from Air New Zealand, formally from them, about this idea that Whenuapai could be used as a second domestic airport in New Zealand?
Not even a post-it note.
Were they ever serious about it then?
Well, someone clearly was, because he made a big deal of it in the media and he had a hell of a lot to say. And it seemed to me that, to take the gentleman at his word, that they have done a lot of work. And I was just gobsmacked that, as I said to Air New Zealand in a private conversation, look, what you did is tantamount to someone coming up my drive and doing an assessment on what they would do with my home and my little lifestyle block. Should they decide to buy it? Should I be willing to sell it? Should they decide to have a conversation with me? I just found it all quite bizarre, quite frankly.
And that's Defence Minister Ron Mark there. It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Overseas now, and just when it appeared Hong Kong's protest movement was faltering, tens of thousands of demonstrators have hit the streets again. They packed the central business district for a rally aimed at the US President Donald Trump and Congress. And while last night's protests were peaceful, police have just revealed that a bomb was detonated at an event on the weekend. The ABC's Dan Conifer reports.
There were American tunes and hundreds of US flags waving in the Hong Kong sky, held aloft by demonstrators who packed a park in the city's CBD and spilled into laneways and onto major roads. Organisers had guessed about 2,000 people were going to attend. Their crowd estimate after the event, 130,000. One of those behind the gathering was Leung.
The USA will be passing the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act soon, so we hope the rally will show the United States stand for the freedom in order to push the act.
They hope that act does pass Congress and is then waved through by the US President Donald Trump. The law could impose sanctions on anyone who undermines the relative autonomy enjoyed by Hong Kong after it was handed back from Britain to China. This demonstrator says the act would hold Beijing to its past undertakings.
What is promised in our one country and two system, and we are not asking more than that. We are just asking for what we should have.
The territory's Beijing-backed government insists the one country, two systems model has been successfully implemented. But many locals disagree, and violent attacks have intensified over recent weekends. Hong Kong Police Deputy Commissioner Tang Ping Keung says someone could die.
Violence against police officers has reached a life-threatening level.
He's revealed that a small homemade explosive was remotely detonated as officers cleared roadblocks on Sunday. No injuries have been reported, but this protester Wilson says peaceful demonstrations have failed and many feel they've been left with no choice but to resort to violence.
Most of the Hong Kong people, at least for the young generation, accepts and at least understands, to say the least, to understand that why the protesters are doing these things.
Dan Conifer with that report from Hong Kong. The way the Defence Force held records relating to Operation Burnham has been under scrutiny at today's public hearing. The inquiry is investigating allegations the Defence Force covered up civilian deaths during the operation in Afghanistan in 2010. But it was suspended last month when it was revealed a report stating it was possible civilians had been killed during Burnham had been left to languish in a Defence Force safe since 2011. The Defence Force held the line for years. It was unlikely anyone had died. Laura Dooney was at the hearing.
Last month it was revealed there was an International Security Assistance Force report into the operation and that a register existed that showed it was put into a Defence Force safe in 2011. Military staff told the inquiry they didn't know how Defence got the report, known as an IAT report, but the register was signed in by the Office of the Director of Special Operations. Today, that person, retired Colonel Jim Blackwell, gave his evidence. He explained he asked for the report in April 2011 after allegations of civilian deaths emerged in the media.
I printed a copy of it and I took it to the Office of the Chief of Defence Force. I gave it to Mike Thompson, who was the Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of the Chief of Defence, and who was responsible for coordinating between the Office of the Chief of Defence Force and the Office of the Minister of Defence. I said to him this was a document that the Chief of Defence and the Minister of Defence needed to see.
Mr Blackwell says he had asked for that report from those in the conflict zone by email. But the lawyer for the inquiry, Christy MacDonald, said no such emails had been given to the inquiry and suggested perhaps Mr Blackwell had not sent any. At which point the lawyer for the Defence Force, Paul Radich, interjected.
We've addressed the fact, I think, in the evidence of Colonel Blackwell that the emails over this period just aren't available, much to everybody's frustration, our own included, that the way in which the system has worked is that those emails are not there. And when we're dealing now with information alleging other people's involvement that we haven't seen and we don't know about, it becomes very difficult.
And Ms MacDonald responded.
We do have emails, classified emails from theatre for this period. We don't have these emails.
Mr Blackwell told the inquiry it was better to store his documents electronically than to make hard copies. He says he had a very secure system. Mr Blackwell says he had been happy to assist the inquiry, but was told the information that related to it and him was no longer available on that system.
To be honest, I'm pretty disappointed. There's decades of operations in there, and I would have thought all of that information would have been particularly relevant.
He said the computer system would have had a copy of the report, the email it came with, and copies of any briefings he had made to the Minister of Defence. He says one copy of the report went into the safe in 2011. The other went to Defence Minister Wayne Mapp via the Office of the Chief of Defence Force. Mr Blackwell then explained what he told Defence Minister Wayne Mapp in a briefing about the report.
I said that the document, which was a standard NATO response, was neither to confirm or deny, was that there may have been. But there was no evidence that I had viewed, including the footage, the storyboards, or the discussions I'd had with my colleagues that led me to believe that there were civilian casualties.
Mr Blackwell said he believes a copy of the document shredded before the new Defence Minister Jonathan Coleman started was the IAT report. In 2014, the report was found in a safe by Dr Coleman's staff. Dr Coleman was said to be furious and contacted former Defence Chief Tim Keating. Dr Coleman corrected the public record, but Tim Keating did not. Mr Keating has previously told the inquiry he has no idea who put the report in the safe. The hearing is to continue for 2 more days. In Wellington, for Checkpoint, ko Laura Dooney, tēnei.
Relations between Boris Johnson and Queen Elizabeth have reportedly hit rock bottom after the Prime Minister forced her to deliver what constitutional experts have branded a party political broadcast for his Conservative Party. The Queen came to the House of Lords to deliver a Queen's speech, actually written by the Prime Minister, which sets out a new legislative programme for Mr Johnson's government. However, the timing of the speech, which comes shortly before an expected general election, is a breach of the tradition that such speeches are normally made after voters go to the polls. The BBC's Norman Smith reports.
Devoid of a Commons majority and having lost every significant vote he's held in the Commons, there seems little prospect of Mr Johnson being able to pass any major legislation in the current Parliament. Despite that, the Prime Minister today chose to set out a busy legislative programme dominated by bills on Brexit and law and order.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation.
Among the Brexit measures, proposals for an independent fisheries policy, a trade bill paving the way for an independent trade policy, and the introduction of a points-based immigration system to replace freedom of movement. On crime, there'll be longer sentences for those convicted of serious violent offences and tougher punishments for foreign offenders. In the Commons, Mr Johnson told MPs the Queen's speech was underpinned by One Nation conservative values.
That is the vision for the society I believe in. A generous, tolerant, outward-looking and humane society. That is the vision at the core of this Queen's speech, and I commend it to the House.
The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, dismissed the measures in the Queen's speech as fool's gold. They should not disguise, he said, from the government's failure to deliver on Brexit or to end austerity. It was, said Mr Corbyn, a propaganda exercise.
There has never been such a farce as a government with a majority of minus 45 and a 100% record of defeat in the House of Commons, setting out a legislative agenda they know cannot be delivered in this Parliament.
The hope in Downing Street is that today's Queen's speech will appeal to voters weary of the endless Brexit delay and anxious to move on to other pressing domestic issues. The danger that a further Brexit extension becomes necessary, making the measures in this Queen's speech even less likely to ever be introduced.
Norman Smith reporting. The All Blacks and Irish are both bullish about their chances of winning this weekend's quarterfinal in Tokyo, despite the bookies leaning heavily in favour of the defending champs. Ireland have beaten New Zealand twice since 2016, and their Kiwi-born coach, Joe Smith's record against Steve Hansen is 2 wins and 2 losses, each including Ireland's first win on home soil at the end of last year. The Irish have lost star centre Bundy Aki for the rest of the World Cup due to his suspension for a high tackle in their win over Samoa. But they're embracing the underdog status, while the All Blacks will be confident but wary of being labelled heavy favourites. Rugby reporter Joe Porter has just got out of the latest All Blacks press conference, fronted by assistant coach Ian Foster, forwards Matt Todd and Adi Savia, Joe Moody and Dane Coles. So Joe, what is the feeling among the All Blacks? Do they seem relaxed or tense? What?
Yeah, I would say pretty tense. There's definitely an edge this week. The All Blacks are nervous about this Irish side. Like you mentioned, Steve Hansen and Joe Schmidt have a 2-win, 2-loss record against each other. The Irish have had the All Blacks number twice in the last 4 years, or twice in the last 4 games they've played. But there certainly is a bit of worry, a bit of tension amongst this All Blacks side, far less relaxed than they were last week. And that was very obvious when Ian Foster was giving some fairly catchy answers to some questions about what made the Irish such a troublesome side for the All Blacks.
Interesting. Hey, they've got the Welsh referee, Nigel Owens, who obviously has a significant track record. Are they happy with that choice?
Yeah, they are happy with that choice. In fact, they'll be very, very happy, considering they could have had a couple of Frenchmen who they have had some troubles with in the past. And they're very happy with referee Nigel Owens. He is one of the best in the game, if not the best. Seems to have a good relationship with the players and the All Blacks as well. So I think they'll be very happy with that. And they'll be happy with the rest of the referees' appointments too. Yes, so they've really they could probably come up trumps with that one there, the All Blacks. They'll be very pleased.
So what makes Ireland such a tough side for the All Blacks to beat then?
Well, Coach Joe Schmidt is a very sort of cognitive coach. He does a lot of thinking, heaps of analysis. And he really does have, I guess, a bit of an idea of how to beat the All Blacks, how to contain their strengths and exploit their weaknesses. Steve Hansen earlier this week said too much analysis can be a weakness. Now, that is obviously a shot at Joe Schmidt. So there's tension between the two coaches, of course, because the Irish have had the All Blacks number. Andy Farrell, the defensive coach, he's got a particular defensive system that the Irish employ, which really has shut the All Blacks down in the past, and they've had a lot of trouble breaking through that defence. They've been able to stifle the ABs and expose their weaknesses in many ways, so I guess they are one of the teams that the All Blacks have found the hardest to beat in recent times.
Yeah, and so who are their key players going to be, and what are they going to be up to try and unsettle the ABs?
Well, first five, Johnny Sexton and halfback Conor Murray, they are the stars of this Irish team. They know how to win. They're desperate to win. Their desire to win is unparalleled. They were part of the British and Irish Lions tour in 2017, where they, of course, drew with the All Blacks and getting a win in Wellington in that second game. They're part of the team that won in Chicago, part of the team that beat the All Blacks for the first time in Dublin on Irish soil last year. They'll be looking to box kick a lot from halfback Conor Murray to put pressure on these rookie AB wingers under the high ball. And, of course, that Andy Farrell rush defence will really come to the fore as the Irish look to slow down the All Blacks ball and stop them using any of their firepower out wide.
And what have we got to do to get the better of them?
Well, the All Blacks have to get ascendancy at set piece, scrum time and line-out. They have to be good at the breakdown and get ascendancy there so they can get that quick ball to execute their plays they want. They'll have to come up with a few exciting things like crossfield kicks to try and unlock the rush defence, and they'll use their forwards who have a skill set as ball players to try and move those last-minute passes to move the point of contact and get around this Irish defence. They'll, of course, try and force turnovers and score from the counter-attack. So a lot of it comes down to two very different types of play, and it'll be a very cracking, interesting game on the weekend.
You bet, Joe. Thanks, Joe. That is Joe Porter joining us there from Tokyo. And in breaking news, the Scottish Rugby Union has been referred to the Disputes Committee over their comments about the potential cancellation of their World Cup clash against Japan. The scratching of Sunday's match in Yokohama due to Typhoon Hagibis would have eliminated the Scots from the tournament, and Scottish Rugby Union Chief Mark Dodson threatened legal action to enforce the postponement. Now, Dodson has also said organisers would have taken action to ensure the match would have gone ahead if it involved the All Blacks. All we've got time for this evening. Catch you again tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The mother of a disabled boy who received deep grazes to his face at an Auckland kindergarten says he's been traumatised by the experience. Severe weather warnings remain in place for much of the Upper North Island after gale force winds and heavy rain lashed the region today. The victim of a shooting in the town of Foxton yesterday has died, and a man has now been charged with murder. And Sky City casino workers have been picketing outside an Auckland hotel. Our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
The two being attacked in the districts, we call them red districts, where there are a lot of Chinese immigrants, a lot of support for China, for Beijing.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
I knew that it was a local government elections coming up, and I thought, hey, you know what? Let's give local government a go.
Up to date, if